Commander Auric Talon stood at the observation deck of the battlecruiser Aegis, staring at the endless expanse of stars. He had been in the Interstellar Coalition for over 20 years, fighting wars across dozens of star systems. He had seen planets fall, fleets destroyed, and civilizations wiped out. In his mind, he believed he understood war completely. Strategy, discipline, and strength. These were the keys to victory. Anything else was a distraction. Yet something about this mission felt different. The Coalition had discovered a star system under threat from the Clivans, a race known for their advanced technology and ruthless tactics. Reports warned that they were nearly unstoppable, and this deployment would be dangerous. Auric's confidence in his own skills had never wavered, but he couldn't shake a creeping doubt. "Commander," a voice called. Auric turned to see Lieutenant Mira Harlan, his second-in-command, approaching. Her expression was tense but determined. "Report," Auric said. "The human volunteer teams have arrived," she said. "Engineers, scientists, medics, even civilians who volunteered. They're preparing to join the front lines." Auric frowned. Civilians? On a battlefield? This is not a place for people who don't know war. Mira hesitated. "They're trained for basic survival and emergency operations. Some of them have expertise that could help in unexpected ways." Auric shook his head. "I've seen enough of war to know what matters. Brains and kindness won't stop a Clivan destroyer from leveling a city." Mira didn't respond. She only nodded and left, leaving Auric alone with his thoughts. He watched the volunteers descend from their transport ships, engineers carrying specialized equipment, medics with portable medical kits, and scientists carrying experimental devices. Among them were ordinary citizens, young and old, some barely trained in combat. Auric's eyes narrowed as he studied them. "These people are going to get themselves killed," he muttered. "I won't let them endanger my fleet." But even as he said it, a part of him couldn't help but wonder why they had volunteered. In all his years of service, he had never seen civilians willingly step into a war zone. The next day, the Coalition forces landed on the edge of the contested planet, Talora 7. Its surface was rugged, with jagged mountains and deep canyons, and the Clivans had already begun fortifying key positions. Auric walked among his troops, scanning the horizon for signs of the enemy. The human volunteers had set up a makeshift camp nearby. He observed them curiously. Engineers were inspecting old communication towers, attempting to repair and upgrade them. Scientists were studying the planet's magnetic fields, hoping to find ways to disrupt Clivan sensors. Medics were preparing triage stations, organizing supplies for what Auric expected to be heavy casualties. Auric approached a young engineer named Leora Nash. "You really think you can make a difference here?" he asked. Leora looked up calmly. "We can try. Every little advantage counts. Even small improvements can save lives." Auric scoffed. "I've seen planets burn, Leora. Your little gadgets won't stop them." She didn't argue. Instead, she smiled faintly and went back to her work. There was a confidence in her actions that Auric found unsettling. Later that evening, Auric convened a strategy meeting with his officers. Holographic maps of Talora 7 floated above the table, showing Clivan positions and coalition forces. Auric outlined a plan for a preemptive strike on one of the enemy's forward outposts. "As long as we follow the plan, we should be able to neutralize their patrols," Auric said. "Keep the civilians out of direct combat. They will slow us down, not help." Lieutenant Harlan hesitated. "Sir, the engineers could provide support in ways our troops can't. Their equipment could give us an edge if we coordinate with them." Auric shook his head firmly. "I don't need luck. I need discipline. Stick to the plan." That night, Auric walked the perimeter of the camp alone. The volunteers were quiet. Some huddled around small fires, others working late into the night. He observed them from a distance, expecting to see fear or hesitation. Instead, he saw focus, determination, and a willingness to face the unknown. He remembered the countless soldiers he had commanded over the years, many of whom had lost hope under fire. And yet here were civilians, facing certain danger, yet moving forward with courage. It was confusing. A small voice interrupted his thoughts. "Commander Talon?" Arik turned to see a young medic, Kira Solon, approaching. She was no older than 20, her uniform slightly too big for her frame. "You don't have to be here alone," she said softly. "It helps to talk sometimes." Arik blinked. "Talk? About what?" "About fear," she said simply. "Everyone's afraid, even the strongest soldiers. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of it." Arik felt a pang of unease. The words were simple, yet they struck at something deep inside him. He had always thought courage was measured by victories, by numbers and strategy. He had never considered that bravery could come from something as human as hope. "I've seen a lot of fear," he admitted quietly, "and a lot of people fail to overcome it." Kira smiled. "Maybe. But that doesn't mean we can't try. That's what humans do. They try, even when it seems impossible." Arik looked at her, then at the volunteers working through the night. For the first time in decades, he felt a strange sense of respect, and maybe a hint of doubt in everything he thought he knew. The next morning, the Coalition received word of Clivan's scouts moving through the canyon systems near their position. Arik prepared his troops for engagement, still intent on keeping the civilians out of danger. As the battle began, he quickly realized that war on Talora 7 was not what he had expected. The terrain was unpredictable, and the Clivans were cunning, setting traps and ambushes. Despite his careful planning, his troops were forced to adapt on the fly. Then he witnessed something that would stay with him forever. A group of engineers, led by Leora, had moved into a ruined communications tower under heavy fire. Using their equipment, they managed to restore a critical relay, allowing the Coalition to coordinate attacks and avoid ambushes. Their actions directly saved dozens of soldiers. Arik's jaw tightened. He had underestimated them. Later, a medic unit, including Kira, risked their lives to evacuate wounded soldiers from a narrow canyon under enemy fire. Their bravery allowed Arik's forces to regroup and hold their position until reinforcements arrived. By the end of the day, the Coalition had survived the initial skirmish, but Arik was shaken. The civilians, people he had doubted, had made a difference that he had not thought possible. That night, Arik sat alone again, staring at the stars. He felt a mixture of pride and confusion. The war he thought he understood was proving to be more complex than strategy and strength. It was also about creativity, courage, and the human spirit. He realized that for the first time he was witnessing humanity in its purest form, ordinary people performing extraordinary acts, not for glory or recognition, but because they refused to give up. Arik knew that the days ahead would be even more dangerous. The Clivans were relentless, and the Coalition's forces were stretched thin. Yet something had changed inside him. He could no longer dismiss the power of humanity. As he closed his eyes, preparing for the next day, he whispered to himself, "Maybe. I don't understand war as much as I thought. Maybe there's more to victory than I know. And maybe, just maybe, humanity is stronger than I ever imagined." The morning sun rose over Talora 7, casting jagged shadows across the canyon landscape. Commander Arik Talon stood at the edge of a ridge, observing the valley below. The skirmish from the previous day had left scars on the land, twisted metal, craters, and smoke rising from burned-out vehicles. His soldiers were tired, but they were still alive, and that alone was a small victory. Arik glanced toward the volunteer camp, where engineers, scientists, and medics were already at work. For the first time, He was starting to see the truth in what Kira Solon had said. Humanity's strength was not only in trained soldiers or advanced weapons, it was in the courage, creativity, and will of ordinary people. A communication alert interrupted his thoughts. Lieutenant Mira Harlan's voice came through, urgent and precise. "Commander, we've detected Cliven forces moving toward the northern canyon. They're fast, and their weapons are more advanced than yesterday's scouts." Auric clenched his fists. "Prepare the troops. Civilians stay behind unless absolutely necessary." "Yes, sir," Mira replied. The northern canyon was a narrow, twisting gorge surrounded by cliffs. Auric knew this terrain could easily become a trap, especially against an enemy like the Clivens, who were experts in ambush tactics. He positioned his troops along strategic points and ordered drones to scout ahead. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the hum of drones and distant rumblings of Clivan ships. Auric's mind wandered to the volunteers. The engineers had developed portable energy shields during the night. Scientists had designed devices to interfere with the Cliven's targeting systems. He had reluctantly allowed some of their equipment to be distributed among his troops, although he doubted it would be effective. Then it happened. A deafening roar echoed through the canyon. The Clivens had arrived. They descended from above in sleek, dark ships, their weapons glowing ominously. Auric barked orders, and his soldiers opened fire. The canyon erupted in a storm of energy beams, explosions, and chaos. In the midst of the chaos, Auric noticed something unexpected. A small team of engineers, led by Leora Nash, had moved to a damaged communications tower under fire. Despite the blinding energy blasts around them, they worked calmly, repairing circuits and rerouting power. Within minutes, the tower came alive, sending real-time tactical data to the coalition forces. Auric's jaw tightened. He had always believed that only soldiers could influence a battlefield, but here were civilians actively changing the course of the fight. Nearby, medics like Kira Solon were risking their lives to evacuate wounded soldiers. The canyon was a death trap, but they moved with precision, dragging soldiers to safer areas and applying field treatments. Each act of courage gave Auric's forces a chance to regroup. "Impossible," he muttered under his breath. Hours passed. The coalition forces began to gain an unexpected advantage. The engineers' devices disrupted the Cliven's targeting systems, causing their weapons to miss fire. The medics' quick work kept soldiers alive long enough to return to the fight. Even civilians in support roles were providing critical assistance, carrying supplies, repairing damaged drones, and directing soldiers to safe routes through the canyon. Auric found himself in the middle of the action, issuing orders and coordinating attacks. He noticed that the soldiers were responding differently now. They were inspired by the civilians' bravery. It was as if the volunteers' courage had given the soldiers a new determination, a reminder of why they fought. During a brief lull, Auric caught sight of Leora Nash standing atop a crumbling cliff, adjusting a device that emitted pulses of energy. The pulses interfered with Cliven sensors, making their ships temporarily blind to the Coalition's positions. "You're risking your life for this?" Auric shouted over the wind. Leora looked at him calmly. "We all are, Commander, but it's worth it. Every second counts." Auric felt a strange mix of admiration and disbelief. He had underestimated these people, and they were proving him wrong. The battle continued throughout the day. Clivan reinforcements poured into the canyon, and Auric's troops were pushed to their limits. Yet, with every challenge, the humans found solutions. Scientists deployed temporary energy barriers, engineers rigged old vehicles into mobile fortresses, and medics maintained the lifeline that kept soldiers in the fight. Auric began to see a pattern. The Clivens relied on technology and brute force, but humans relied on adaptability and ingenuity. Every setback became an opportunity for creativity. The coalition forces learned to expect the unexpected, using unconventional methods to survive and push back. By late afternoon, the Clivens' advance slowed. Their formations were disrupted, their attacks miscalculated, and morale among their troops faltering. Auric had never experienced a battlefield where civilians had such a profound effect on the outcome. He turned to Mira Harlan. I underestimated them," he admitted quietly. Mira nodded, her expression calm but knowing. "It's not about underestimating, sir. It's about understanding that humanity is more than soldiers and weapons. Our strength is in our spirit." Auric looked out over the canyon. The volunteers continued to work tirelessly, undeterred by danger or exhaustion. He realized that they were not just assisting, they were leading in ways he had never anticipated. As night fell, the battlefield quieted. Fires burned, smoke filled the sky, and wounded soldiers were tended to. Auric walked among the volunteers, observing their actions. Some were exhausted, sitting against rocks, yet they were still checking equipment and making plans for tomorrow. He paused near Kira Solon, who was cleaning supplies for the next day. "You've done more than I expected," he said softly. Kira smiled. "We all have a role to play. Even when things seem impossible, we keep trying. That's what humans do." Auric felt a warmth in his chest, a mixture of pride and humility. For the first time, he truly understood that courage was not measured by victories alone. It was measured by the willingness to act in the face of fear, to find solutions where none seem possible, and to protect one another even when the odds are against you. Later, Auric stood on a ridge overlooking the battlefield. The Clivans had retreated for now. He knew they would return stronger, but something had changed inside him. He no longer saw war as a simple equation of strength and strategy. It was also about the human spirit, the courage to innovate, and the willingness to stand together. He reflected on the day's events. Ordinary people had done extraordinary things. They had turned the tide of battle not through sheer force, but through heart, ingenuity, and unity. The following morning, Auric called a meeting with the volunteers and his officers. The human team had performed beyond expectations, and Auric wanted to acknowledge their efforts. "Yesterday, you all proved something important," he began, his voice steady. "I thought I understood war, but I was wrong. War is not only about strategy or firepower, it's also about courage, creativity, and the will to act when others cannot. Each of you has made a difference." There were murmurs of surprise among the volunteers. Many had expected praise, but not from someone like Auric Talon, a seasoned veteran who rarely complimented anyone. "You showed me what humanity can do," he continued. "Your actions saved lives, protected our forces, and changed the course of this fight. I underestimated you, and I will not make that mistake again." Leora Nash stepped forward. "We're just doing what we can, Commander. That's all any of us can do." Auric shook his head. "No, what you did was extraordinary. I've seen soldiers fail under fire, but you, ordinary humans, stood tall in the face of danger. That is what makes us strong. That is what makes us human." The volunteers looked at each other, their expressions a mix of pride and determination. For them, the fight was not just about survival. It was about proving that humanity could rise above impossible odds. The next mission loomed. A larger Clivan force was moving toward Talora 7's central settlement. Auric knew it would be the most dangerous engagement yet. But for the first time, he felt a spark of hope. If ordinary humans could achieve so much in the canyon battle, what could they do when fully prepared and united? The thought filled him with both excitement and caution. He gathered his officers and the volunteer leaders. "We will face the Clivans together," he said. "Our strength is not only in our weapons, but in each other. We adapt, we innovate, and we never give up. That is our advantage. That is humanity's advantage." Mira Harlan smiled slightly. "Then let's show them what humans are capable of." Auric looked out at the volunteers, their eyes bright with determination. He knew that the real battle had only just begun. and that humanity's true strength would soon be tested in ways he could never have imagined. As night settled over Talora 7, Arik allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The battlefield was dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgiving, yet he no longer felt the weight of dread he had carried for decades. He had witnessed something greater than tactics or technology. He had witnessed humanity itself, and he knew that, as long as people refused to give up, hope was never lost. The morning on Talora 7 began in tense silence. Commander Arik Talon stood atop a ridge overlooking the central settlement, his gaze sweeping the jagged skyline. The previous battles had tested his beliefs, shaken his confidence, and forced him to reconsider the essence of war. What he had witnessed from the human volunteers was unprecedented. Their courage, ingenuity, and adaptability had given the coalition forces unexpected advantages, yet the day's intelligence reports left no room for optimism. The Clivans were mobilizing a massive assault on the settlement, a force larger and better armed than any the humans had faced so far. Their strategy was precise, their technology devastating. Even seasoned soldiers like Arik could feel the weight of the threat pressing down. "Commander," Lieutenant Mira Harlan reported, approaching with a datapad in hand. "The Clivans' main fleet is approaching from orbit. Our sensors detect multiple drop pods carrying assault units. They're heading straight for the settlement." Arik nodded grimly. "Prepare the defense. All human volunteers must be integrated into the plans. No one is staying out of this fight. This time, we face the enemy together." The settlement itself was a mix of rugged buildings and improvised structures. Civilians had fortified key locations under the guidance of engineers, while scientists had developed energy barriers and camouflage systems to protect critical areas. Medics had set up field hospitals in hidden shelters, ready to treat the wounded immediately. Arik walked among the volunteers, observing them as they prepared. He noticed how Leora Nash and her team had installed rapid deployment turrets that could fire with surprising accuracy. Kira Solon and her medics were checking triage stations, organizing supplies with meticulous care. Even ordinary citizens, many with no combat experience, were helping load supplies, maintain equipment, and coordinate defenses. For the first time, Arik felt a sense of awe rather than doubt. These were people who refused to be victims. They were active participants in shaping the battle's outcome. By midday, the Clivans arrived. Massive warships hovered in the sky, their energy weapons glowing ominously. Drop pods descended rapidly, releasing assault units equipped with advanced armor and weaponry. The settlement shook with the impact of their initial strikes. Arik issued orders with precision, positioning coalition forces strategically to counter the Clivan advance. Yet he quickly realized that conventional tactics alone would not be enough. The Clivans' coordination and technology were formidable, and even the most disciplined troops struggled to keep pace. That was when the humans began to shine. Engineers activated their energy barriers, disrupting the Clivans' targeting systems and providing safe zones for coalition forces. Scientists deployed sensor jamming devices that confused the enemy, causing some drop pods to land far from their intended positions. Medics moved through the chaos, ensuring that wounded soldiers returned to the fight quickly. Arik's heart raced. For the first time, he truly understood the idea that humanity was more than the sum of its parts. The battle escalated in intensity. Clivan assault units moved through the streets with lethal precision, but the human defenders responded with unexpected creativity. Improvised traps slowed enemy advances. Engineers had reprogrammed some of the Clivans' captured drones to turn against their allies. Citizens who had never held a weapon before were using their knowledge of the settlement's layout to guide soldiers through hidden paths and ambush points. Arik moved from one critical location to another, coordinating defenses and observing the volunteers. Each action, no matter how small, had a ripple effect. Soldiers were inspired, Enemy tactics were disrupted, and slowly, the tide began to turn. During a particularly tense moment, a Cliven strike team breached the northern perimeter. Auric rushed toward the danger, only to see Leora Nash and her engineers confronting the intruders. They had repurposed an old cargo transporter into a makeshift mobile turret, using it to block the enemy advance while protecting nearby civilians. Their bravery and ingenuity held the line long enough for coalition forces to counterattack. Auric felt a mix of pride and disbelief. Ordinary humans were performing extraordinary feats, acting with courage and precision that even trained soldiers struggled to match. In the midst of the battle, Kira Solon and her medics faced an overwhelming challenge. A Cliven ambush had pinned down a group of soldiers, leaving them injured and exposed. Without hesitation, Kira led her team through the chaos, tending to the wounded and guiding them to safety. Each medic moved with speed and confidence, improvising treatments and coordinating evacuations under fire. Auric watched in awe. "This is unbelievable," he muttered. "They're saving lives and changing the battle in ways I never imagined." It became clear to him that the Clivens were unprepared for humanity's adaptability. They expected predictable responses, rigid formations, and conventional strategies. Instead, they faced an enemy that was inventive, unified, and willing to take risks for the greater good. By evening, the Clivens had suffered significant setbacks. Their assault units were scattered, their coordination disrupted, and morale faltering. Auric took a moment to survey the battlefield. The settlement had sustained damage, but the human defenders were holding. Soldiers moved with renewed determination, encouraged by the courage they had witnessed from the volunteers. Auric called a temporary ceasefire in communications to regroup. He gathered his officers and volunteer leaders for a briefing. "Today, we proved something extraordinary," he began. "The Clivens expected an easy victory, but we showed them that humanity cannot be underestimated. Each of you, engineers, scientists, medics, and citizens, played a role in turning the tide. Your courage and ingenuity saved lives and changed the course of this battle." Leora Nash stepped forward. "We're just doing what we can, Commander. That's all anyone can do." Auric shook his head firmly. "No. What you did was beyond ordinary. You showed that humanity is more than weapons and strategy. It's creativity, courage, and unity. That is our true strength." That night, as Talora 7's sky glowed with distant fires and the hum of retreating Cliven ships, Auric reflected on the day's events. He realized that war was no longer just a contest of firepower. It was also a contest of ingenuity, resilience, and spirit. Ordinary humans had changed the course of the battle, not through force alone, but through resourcefulness, bravery, and unwavering determination. He walked through the volunteer camp, observing people who were exhausted yet still working tirelessly. Engineers were repairing damaged equipment, scientists were recalibrating energy devices, and medics were preparing for the inevitable casualties of the next engagement. Auric's heart swelled with respect and admiration. These were ordinary people doing extraordinary things, motivated not by glory or reward, but by a sense of duty and unity. The next day, intelligence reports indicated that the Clivens were regrouping and planning a renewed offensive. This time, however, Auric felt a sense of confidence. The human volunteers had demonstrated that they could adapt, innovate, and act decisively under pressure. Their bravery had inspired the soldiers, disrupted the enemy's plans, and shown that humanity could rise to meet any challenge. Auric convened a strategic meeting with his officers and volunteer leaders. "Tomorrow the Clivens will return with greater force," he said. "But we are ready. We have learned from the previous battle, and we will continue to adapt. Our strength is not only in our weapons, but in our ability to work together, to innovate, and to face fear with courage." Mira Harlan nodded. "They'll see what humans are capable of, Commander. They'll see that we are not easily defeated." Auric looked at the volunteers, their eyes filled with determination. "This is more than a battle," he said. "It is a demonstration of humanity's true strength. Remember that. No matter what comes, we fight together, and together we are unstoppable." As the sun set over Talora 7, Auric stood on a ridge overlooking the settlement. The lights of the human camp glimmered like stars, and the silhouettes of volunteers moving with purpose created a sense of quiet pride. He thought of the Clevans, confident in their technology and power, but he knew they had not accounted for the human spirit. It was that spirit that had turned the tide of the battle. Ordinary people had performed extraordinary acts. Engineers, medics, scientists, and citizens alike had changed the course of events, demonstrating that humanity's greatest strength lay not in weapons or strategy, but in heart, creativity, and unity. Auric Talon finally understood what he had been blind to for decades. War was not only about discipline and tactics, it was also about resilience, adaptability, and the willingness to act in the face of impossible odds. Humanity, he realized, had qualities that no enemy could predict or counter. For the first time in years, Auric felt hope, not the cautious hope of a seasoned soldier, but a deep, unwavering hope inspired by the courage of the people around him. He knew that the next battle would be even more dangerous, but he also knew that the volunteers had changed everything. As night fell over Talora 7, the commander whispered to himself, "I thought I understood war, but I was wrong. Humanity is stronger than I ever imagined." The fires of battle would return tomorrow, but Auric was no longer afraid. He had witnessed the true power of humans, and he knew that as long as people refused to give up, no challenge was insurmountable. The dawn of the fourth day on Talora 7 brought a tense calm. Commander Auric Talon stood atop the central ridge, overlooking the settlement that had become both a home and a battlefield. The previous engagements had revealed something extraordinary. The volunteers, ordinary humans, had shifted the course of battle through courage, ingenuity, and teamwork. But today was different. The Clivans were returning in full force. Intelligence reports predicted their largest offensive yet, with dozens of drop pods, energy cannons, and fully armed assault units targeting the settlement. It was a battle that could decide the fate of the system. Auric knew that every decision, every action, and every human life would count. "Commander," Lieutenant Mira Harlan said, approaching with urgency, "the Clivans are approaching faster than we expected. They've deployed additional reconnaissance drones, and their orbital fleet is in attack formation." Auric exhaled deeply. "Then we fight smarter, not just harder. Everyone, prepare for engagement. Every volunteer, every soldier, every citizen, play your part. This is the moment humanity shows its strength." The settlement hummed with activity. Engineers like Leora Nash moved swiftly, setting up mobile energy barriers along narrow streets and preparing turret defenses. Scientists deployed sensor jamming arrays, designed to confuse Clivan targeting systems. Medics, led by Kira Solon, ensured that triage stations were stocked and accessible. Even citizens who had never held a weapon were carrying supplies, relaying communications, and guiding soldiers through concealed pathways. Auric walked among them, observing with awe. "This is no longer about following orders," he muttered to himself. "This is about human will, human courage, and human creativity in action." A young volunteer approached him nervously. "Commander, do you really think we can stop them?" Auric smiled faintly, placing a reassuring hand on the volunteer's shoulder. "We've already stopped them before. Today, we do it again, together." The first wave of Clivans struck at midday. Massive drop pods fell from orbit, releasing armored assault units into the settlement. Energy cannons fired from their warships, sending shockwaves that shook buildings and streets. Soldiers opened fire and chaos erupted. But the humans were ready. Engineers activated shields that absorbed and redirected energy blasts. Scientists' devices scrambled Clivan's sensors, causing their weapons to misfire. Civilians guided troops through hidden alleys and barricaded streets, creating unpredictable choke points that disrupted enemy advances. Auric coordinated with his officers, but he noticed a remarkable shift. The volunteers were acting independently, making decisions that no command could dictate, yet perfectly complementing the overall strategy. Each act of ingenuity slowed the Clivans and gave coalition forces an edge. In one critical moment, a Clivan assault team attempted to flank the southern perimeter. Auric rushed to the scene, expecting to find chaos, but instead he saw Leora Nash leading a group of engineers and civilians in a brilliant defensive maneuver. They had converted supply vehicles into mobile turrets, positioning them to block the enemy's path and protect vulnerable sectors. "You're risking your lives for this?" Auric shouted over the sound of energy fire. Leora looked back calmly. "We're not just fighting. We're protecting everyone who depends on us. That's worth the risk." The maneuver worked perfectly. The Clivan's flanking units were delayed, giving coalition soldiers time to regroup and counterattack. Auric felt a swell of admiration. The volunteers weren't just assisting, they were leading the battle in ways he had never imagined. Meanwhile, Kira Solon and her medics faced their greatest challenge yet. A Clivan bombardment had trapped a group of wounded soldiers in a narrow street. The path was blocked by debris and energy blasts, and retreat seemed impossible. Without hesitation, Kira organized a rescue. She and her team moved through the chaos with speed and precision, dragging the wounded to safety while improvising treatments under fire. Civilians assisted by clearing debris and relaying information. Auric watched from a distance, feeling a profound sense of respect. "Courage," he whispered, "doesn't come from experience. It comes from the heart." By the afternoon, the Clivans had begun to falter. Their advanced technology and brute force could not match the adaptability and resourcefulness of the humans. Every failed attack, every miscalculated maneuver highlighted the unpredictability and ingenuity of the human defenders. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the final phase of the battle unfolded. The Clivans concentrated their remaining forces in a desperate attempt to seize the settlement. Orbital ships fired massive energy beams, and ground units surged forward. The coalition forces were stretched to their limits. But humanity's spirit did not falter. Engineers had set up hidden energy traps that detonated at critical moments, halting Clivan advances. Scientists had recalibrated devices to temporarily disable enemy communications, creating confusion among their ranks. Medics moved tirelessly, ensuring that soldiers and volunteers returned to the fight. Even civilians continued to provide logistical support, coordinate reinforcements, and guide troops safely through hazardous zones. Auric moved through the chaos, issuing orders and coordinating attacks, but he realized that the true strength of this battle lay not in command. It lay in the volunteers themselves. They were thinking, acting, and improvising in ways that no strategy could predict. In a pivotal moment, Leora Nash and her team confronted a massive Clivan war machine approaching the central plaza. Using improvised energy amplifiers and rerouted power conduits, they created a temporary field that disrupted the war machine's energy shields. Soldiers and volunteers worked together to guide it into a trap, where coalition artillery disabled it completely. Auric could hardly believe his eyes. "This is incredible," he muttered. "Ordinary humans are defeating their most powerful weapon." Kira Solon moved through the plaza simultaneously, coordinating evacuations of wounded personnel. Civilians carried supplies, cleared pathways, and guided soldiers through debris-strewn streets. Every act contributed to the collective effort, proving that unity and ingenuity were more powerful than brute force. By nightfall, the Clivan's forces had been repelled. Their orbital ships retreated, drop pods were destroyed, and the remaining assault units had been neutralized. Talora 7 was battered, but humanity had held its ground. Soldiers and volunteers alike were exhausted, yet the settlement remained under human control. Orcs stood on the central ridge, overlooking the aftermath. Fires burned in some areas, and smoke filled the sky, but the spirit of the people below shone brightly. Civilians were helping wounded soldiers, engineers were repairing damaged equipment, and scientists were preparing for the next day. It was a scene of resilience, determination, and triumph. Arik felt a profound shift within himself. The battles had taught him what he had never realized in decades of service. Strength alone did not win wars. Strategy alone did not ensure survival. True power lay in courage, creativity, unity, and the willingness to act despite fear. Humanity, he realized, was more than the sum of its weapons or soldiers. It was the spirit that refused to yield. The next morning, Arik called a formal assembly of volunteers and soldiers. The settlement had been secured, but the message needed to be clear. Humanity had demonstrated its strength, and no enemy could underestimate it again. Today, we have achieved something remarkable, Arik began, his voice carrying over the gathered crowd. We faced an enemy stronger and more advanced than ourselves. We faced danger that could have overwhelmed us, and yet, here we are, standing, united and victorious. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the volunteers. Engineers, scientists, medics, and ordinary citizens all stood proudly, their faces reflecting determination and pride. You showed me what I could not see before, he continued. I thought I understood war. I thought I knew the meaning of courage. But you, ordinary humans, taught me that bravery comes from the heart, innovation comes from necessity, and strength comes from unity. You are humanity at its finest. Leora Nash stepped forward, smiling humbly. We only did what we had to do, Commander. That's what humans do. Arik shook his head firmly. No, what you did was extraordinary. Today you proved that humanity is not limited by fear, equipment, or experience. We adapt. We endure, we innovate, and together, nothing can stop us. As the crowd dispersed, Arik walked through the settlement with Mira Harlan by his side. Civilians were assisting in repairs, soldiers were organizing defenses, and the volunteers continued their work without complaint or hesitation. Sir, Mira said softly, they've changed the battlefield, and they've changed you. Arik nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. Yes, I've learned something invaluable. War is not just about tactics or strength. It's about the people who refuse to give up, even when the odds are impossible. Humanity itself is our greatest weapon. For the first time in decades, Arik felt a deep sense of hope. The battles had been brutal, the enemy relentless, and yet humanity had prevailed, not through overwhelming firepower, but through courage, ingenuity, and unity. He knew that the future would bring more challenges. Other threats would rise, and the Clivans might return. But Arik was no longer afraid. He had witnessed the true power of humans, and he knew that as long as people refused to give up, hope and victory were always possible. As night fell on Talora 7, Arik stood alone on the ridge once more. The settlement below was quiet but alive, a testament to the strength of its defenders. Stars glittered overhead, and the distant hum of coalition ships reminded him that humanity was part of something greater, a force capable of adapting, enduring, and thriving in the face of the unknown. Arik whispered to himself, I thought I understood war, but I was wrong. Humanity is stronger than I ever imagined. And now, I understand what it truly means to witness it in action. The fires of battle had been extinguished, but the light of human courage burned brighter than ever. And in that light, Commander Arik Talon knew that humanity's future, no matter how uncertain, was worth fighting for.